Two people earn exactly the same amount, let's say 2,700 euros net per month, and 10 years later, one is financially free while the other still has to work. How is that possible? In this video, I'll show you how your decisions, habits, and mindset determine whether you become poor or rich, and how your life can turn out completely different and better than that of someone who earns exactly the same as you. And with that, welcome to Northern Finance. My name is Alex Bleck. In our society, it's common to compare one's income with that of others. Things like salary reports across various industries and professions, or channels like Lohnt sich das from Bayerischer Rundfunk are very popular, where jobs and individuals are presented, and it's shown transparently how much people earn in their respective roles and what the participants in the format actually spend their money on. And there are also enormous differences. The chief inspector, for example, has a surplus of 772 euros each month, which is a good amount. But the mechanical engineer for wind turbines only has a surplus of 130 euros at the end of the month, even though 654 euros go into insurance, which suggests that he might also be building capital. But it could also include an expensive professional and disability insurance, given the risky nature of the job. But many people in Germany feel the same way as the mechanical engineer. Almost 40% of people have practically no savings, none at all, and are just living from month to month. 40%, crazy. That naturally leads to people not only feeling uncomfortable and being unable to cushion crises with savings, but also having to cut back on consumption, or as significantly more people do, taking out a loan and going into debt to cover ongoing expenses and maintain their lifestyle, even if it's actually too much. As shown in this study by ING, most people without savings state that they don't earn enough to be able to save anything, and an increasing proportion say that they can't save due to inflation. Particularly striking is the statement from this somewhat older study, which shows that saving behavior doesn't differ much by income even in the sixth decile, meaning the upper 40% of the middle class in German terms. Here, 36% of people have no savings at all. If you earn more, the proportion of people who haven't saved anything does certainly decrease, of course, but even among the top 20% or 10%, there's still a group that absolutely consistently manages to save nothing. No matter how much they earn, they live from month to month and seem to spend money on everything. And this is largely due to the first of the three reasons that make a big difference in wealth: lifestyle inflation. You spend more money simply because you can. A friend of mine in Cyprus, for example, just got himself a Mercedes G-Class at the age of 28, really beautiful car. He earns well and has hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, far more than I do. But even then, to be honest, you don't really need a car like that just to show off. That's one of the strongest forms of lifestyle inflation. And still, at some point I also want to drive an awesome car, I'll be honest, just to reward myself. But in my opinion, doing that in your late 20s is just dumb, at least if you want to build significant wealth, which is my goal. And if the two of us earn the same amount, but he spends 3,450 euros a month on leasing or financing, and I invest that money instead and keep driving my old Suzuki, which you've probably seen, and we both continue like that for the next few years, then with that savings rate and a 7% annual return, I'll have built up 593,000 euros in capital after just 10 years. 414,000 euros of that is what I've paid in, and 179,000 euros is purely interest or returns. And yes, that's an extreme example, but it already starts with the small things. You can also quickly spot lifestyle inflation among friends if you pay attention to how they express themselves. People who are giving into lifestyle inflation often say things like, you have to treat yourself sometimes, or you only live once. Another popular one is, quality comes at a price, or I want to enjoy my life too. And sure, we all want to enjoy life, that sounds reasonable, but you don't necessarily have to buy something you can't afford yet. It's as simple as that. In that case, you should just save up. Otherwise, you'll end up making mistake number 2, which is taking on a lot of debt. Credit cards, buy now, pay later, and financing options eat away at your wealth one monthly payment after another. And especially nasty are things like cars or TVs, in other words, items that constantly lose value. If we again take two people, Alex and Ben, and let's say Ben has 6,000 euros in Klarna debt and is paying 14.79% interest, which is the actual interest rate at Klarna. Then with a term of 3 years, Ben has to pay 204.7 euros every month. That adds up to 1,369 euros in interest over that period, which he no longer has available to use elsewhere. And that's assuming he can always pay on time, because otherwise high late fees get added on top, making the whole thing much more expensive. Alex, on the other hand, is debt-free and invests the amount. After 3 years, that already adds up to 8,196 euros, including 827 euros in interest alone. And if he's investing in P2P loans, he might even be financing Ben. If he simply leaves the amount there without making any further deposits, it grows to 13,160 euros 6 years later without doing anything at all. The third mistake is losing track of things. Do you know how much money you actually spend on fuel each month, how much on coffee here and there, or perhaps on activities with friends? How much do you spend monthly on groceries or eating out at restaurants, approximately? Most people have no idea what these amounts actually are and just make rough estimates. But we humans tend to underestimate, often by a lot, because we simply forget things. That's why it can be really helpful to first get an overview and keep a budget book, whether on paper or digitally, it doesn't matter. I'll also link something for you down in the video description. The main thing is to just get started. Once you have the actual numbers, you can quickly figure out whether you're spending too much on something or not. Your gut feeling is often very helpful, and if you're perhaps spending more than you earn but still don't get a bad feeling about it, then the problem likely runs a bit deeper. And that ultimately leads us to the 3 important habits that will help you build wealth. First of all, you should start early. This is by far the most important point, because someone who starts 10 years earlier has to invest much less to end up significantly wealthier. Once again, we have the 2 people, Ben and Alex. Alex saves 400 euros every month starting at age 20 and sticks to it consistently until he turns 30. And Ben parties a lot, drives a nicer car than Alex in his 20s, and regularly treats himself to things. He manages to get by each month but isn't able to save until he turns 30. And then he realizes that he absolutely needs to start saving because you're not young forever. And now he also saves 400 euros every month until retirement, until age 65. That means for 35 years, which is the typical retirement age. So who has more money at that point? Alex only saved those 400 euros for approximately 10 years, totaling 48,000 euros. But in the end, he has 1,072,000 euros. More than €1,000,000 is the actual return. And Ben, on the other hand, ended up with only 862,000 euros, even though he contributed more than 168,000 euros, simply because he started later and couldn't take as much advantage of compound interest. His higher, much higher deposits still bring him less. And the second good habit is not to touch your assets once you have invested them. I've currently built up a wealth of around 347,000 euros as of the time this video is being recorded. I'm very transparent about that, and I'm planning to buy a new car sometime in the next few months. My old car is still definitely fantastic, but it's almost 6 years old now. And overall it's approaching 30, so it's about time. Now, in my opinion, I could just withdraw part of my own significant financial portfolio, but that would be a huge mistake. And if you want to see my next portfolio update in a week, then leave me a like and subscribe. It's a big support if you're enjoying this video. That video will also include all the details about how I invest specifically. And tapping into that money would be a huge mistake, because I'd basically be taking a chunk out of the snowball of my wealth that's constantly growing, and I'd be seriously hurting myself in the process. That's why I handle it by setting up a new sub-account whenever I want to make a significant purchase. Specifically, for example, and I deposit new money into it each month, in this case for the car. This way, I can definitely purchase a brand new vehicle in half a year to a year without absolutely needing any financing or having to dip into my portfolio. I can pay for it in cash, just like it should be. And as a third good habit, you should regularly and openly talk about money with your friends or digital communities and make it a normal topic. I know money is a taboo subject in many circles, in many families, and maybe you can't even talk about ETF savings plans, the best P2P lending platforms, or Bitcoin with your friends or family. But even then, there are communities like Northern Finance or Reddit Fire, where current financial topics as well as many classics are regularly discussed. There you can ask your own questions or learn a great deal just by reading along over the years. And if you engage with it consistently and regularly, even just mentally, you'll have a much higher chance of becoming successful with it because you keep reminding yourself of it. Let's draw a conclusion from this. If you really want to build substantial wealth, then you need a plan. Just like you need to have a house carefully planned before you can start laying the foundation, you also need to first create a plan for how you'll effectively manage your finances, how much you realistically want and can save, and how you can increase that amount if necessary. What are the things you spend a lot on that you might not actually need? It's far more significant and important to give these things some serious thought and consideration than consistently follow through rather than trying to find the perfect stock or the best ETF in order to get rich quickly, because that doesn't work anyway. The key is simply to start early, stay consistent, and save as much as possible. Try to increase your income as possible, and eventually the snowball will start rolling on its own for you. No matter how much you might save later on, starting early is always worth it. The choice is yours. Do you want to stress about it now, at this moment, and make sacrifices to maximize and increase your wealth? Or do you want to stress about it later in the future because you'll have to save much more just to come close to the same amount as someone who started 10 years earlier? And even if you start later, later is definitely better than never, because the state pension system won't be enough anyway. Yes, at least when my generation retires, that I'm absolutely sure of. And even the generations before us will, in fact, receive significantly less than what people might expect today. So get started now with this video on ETFs, or perhaps this one on P2P loans, if you haven't seen them yet, and feel free to tell me in the comments below what you're doing to build wealth. I look forward to the exchange, and with that, I wish you good returns and see you next time.